Hello, I'm Amy McCrory, Digitization Program Manager in the library's Preservation and Digitization Department. I'm happy to be here for Preservation Week, and I appreciate you all attending this presentation. Today, I'll be talking about how we do the work of creating digital images of materials from the Ohio State University Library's collections. I brought a lot of material today, maybe too much material. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock here. I'm going to time myself. If I find I'm running on so long that we won't have time for questions, I'm just going to cut myself short so you all can ask questions because I do really want to hear your questions and comments. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to advance this slide, except the slide's not, oh, there we go. All right. Um, So as I said, I work in the Preservation and Digitization Department. We are located on the West Campus in the Library Tech Center, about a mile and a half away from the center of the Columbus campus, AKA the Oval. We share space in here with several other important departments, including conservation. We work very closely with them on our projects. Digitization has two dedicated rooms in the tech center, one for photography and the other for book and map scanning. Conservation is right next door, and I am privileged to work with the staff of this department. They make my work possible. They stabilize and repair objects so they can be digitized. They advise me on the handling of fragile materials, and they are altogether wonderful. The digitization program's mission is to digitize materials from the collections, such as books, manuscripts, photographs, maps, artwork, and more. We follow evolving standards and specifications for digital imaging of materials like those found in the library's collection. We keep pace with changing standards because they are always changing. And we advise and consult our colleagues in other departments on these standards and on the best approaches for their own digital projects. We also work across departments with our colleagues who coordinate metadata, cataloging, access to digital content, and preservation of digital content. Time really doesn't permit me to show you all the wonderful things I'd like to from this library's collections, but I will just do some little surveys throughout the presentation. So we actually digitize a lot of historic items that tell the history of the university itself. These come primarily, but not exclusively, from the university's archives. So we do football programs, about 100 years worth. We digitize these page by page. And these are available to view online and read and search page by page in the library's knowledge bank. We also have digitized composite graduation photos for a number of departments going back to the late 1880s, I think. We have digitized so many annual reports of the boards of trustees going back to the beginning. And these are more interesting to read than you might think. There is so much Ohio State history packed into these reports. And of course, we've digitized the student newspaper, The Lantern, going back to 1881. It is full of the history of student life at this university. There are articles, there are photos, and best of all, there are editorial cartoons. This cartoonist finally got the library they wanted, but of course, much too late for them to enjoy it as an undergraduate student. And as you might guess, we digitize a lot of books. This is a dedicated book scanner you're seeing. The V-shaped cradle at the bottom of the scanner allows a book to rest in the cradle when it cannot be opened all the way flat, as a lot of bound books can't. Those cameras up top digitize it page by page, and so this can be done without putting a lot of stress on the book's binding and damaging it. We upload these books, we share them online where people can read them and search them and download their own copies of the books as PDFs. So I want to talk a little bit about our approach to digital imaging, and I've broken it down into 3 categories. We aim to create images that are meaningful, that are accurate, and that are compliant with national and international published standards. So first I want to talk about meaningful images and what makes a meaningful image. It depends on the object. There are some books like this one, for example, that are just fine being scanned in simple bitonal black and white. The text is the important thing here, and it comes across very well in a nice high contrast in a presentation like this. But some books, though, are different. Like this Bible from 1791, there are illustrations in a lot of subtle gray tones. The ink is fading, some of the ink is fading. The paper is getting darker. It's showing the chemical processes that have occurred on the paper over time. And for researchers, this visual information is important, in some cases just as important as the words in the book. So having a full color image is necessary. What I always keep in mind is that especially for these rare and fragile items in the library's special collections, this may be the only view of the item that a lot of researchers ever get. So these images need to contain as much information as possible. If I were to digitize this in grayscale, some of that information would be lost. And if it were done in bitonal black and white, now you're really losing a lot of significant detail in the pages. Another decision we make is the extent of the object that we're going to show. So in this Bible, you've got both pages. You can see the page color and texture. You can see the printed ink, the illustrations, the staining on the pages, all the evidence of the age and wear and tear on the book. And the 2-page spread includes all of that, but pull back a little bit and get an image of the whole book where these 2 pages face up. And you can see a lot more about the physical properties of the book, which are also very important. And I'm going to pause at this point and make sure it's clear that the people who choose the images that we digitize are the librarians and the curators. They have a direct relationship with students and faculty and outside researchers that I do not have. They know what these patrons need from the library materials. They know what they need to see in the digital images, and they can communicate that to me. And then all my decisions are around how to present that visual information in a way that supports the library's mission of supporting teaching, learning, and research. In this book, it's not just the printed content that's presented, but also the very dense handwriting of whoever was reading the book and had some reactions to it. So now there's another layer of meaning here. There's the original book and there's the reaction of the reader, which has its own history that might be very useful or interesting or essential to some researchers. This hands down is one of my favorite images. I do not know why this guy doodled pictures on the blank page of his Bible or somebody's Bible, but I just know when I see it, I feel an immediate kinship to this person. Somebody I've never met, I'm never going to meet, I really don't know anything about him, but this creates an instant bond between me and him. And that's one thing I love about historical objects is sometimes you get a very immediate connection to the past. The outsides of books are important too. You can see from the stamping and the gold and the fittings and the binding that this was an object of high value. You can also see, let me break out the PowerPoint laser here, from the wear and tear where the cover joins the spine, that this book had a lot of usage. This Geneva Bible from the Renaissance era is obviously an object of high value as well, with the metal fittings all the detail on the leather, and one remaining gem here. So I'm assuming it was built really for an individual or an office that had a lot of status and importance. A historian, of course, would know more about it than I do. I also noticed that most of the gems are missing. So you can see the metal fittings look a little bent here. So I'm not a historian, but I'm guessing they were looted. And the additional photo of both covers at the same time show you the extent of the loss. This book was bound in parchment, and parchment is animal skin. And I really like this book for a number of reasons. It's kind of a challenge to photograph because it's a low contrast, kind of monochrome object, and everyone loves a challenge. I was talking to the head of our conservation department, Marcela Estevez, and she was explaining to me how parchment really doesn't like to lie flat. It has a tendency over time, especially in humid conditions, to want to curve and wrinkle. So you kind of see the history of this book as a physical object over time and the book itself transforming. So while I wanted to show details like the red edges of the pages, I also wanted a shot that really emphasized the way this parchment is curving away from the spine of the book. It's documentary information. It's also beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with doing an evidential photograph in a way that's beautiful. It's part of the job. This manuscript, I got to pull up the notes for this one. It contains the records of the Hospital of Santo Spirito in Italy from 1480 to 1521. Apparently, it was a hospital built for religious pilgrims coming to Rome. They had nowhere to get medical treatment. So these are medical records between these two covers. And the binding is not a fancy binding. It's a very functional binding. So I took several shots of it, and most of them emphasized this view into the structure of the actual book binding, which I really like. This book has a pattern stamped into the edges of its pages, and I guess this was pretty common at one time, but I'd actually never seen one before this copy came over to the tech center. The process is called goffering. I think I'm pronouncing it right. So these are goffered pages. I'm pretty sure that's a word I never would have heard if I had not gotten into this line of work. This book came to the conservation department for treatment and repair. It has obviously suffered the indignities of time. The leather's split, the bindings come apart from the rest of the book, and you can see that the silverfish have been at it, digging these little channels. I guess either silverfish or some other critter that likes eating book materials. So I took a very detailed shot of this in order to capture the texture, the different parts of the book, the parchment, the leather, what's left of the little binding strings here, and other materials. So moving from the medieval and Renaissance era to more contemporary times, another type of book that really benefits from 3D photos is artist books. They are consciously works of art, and they often challenge the idea of what a book is. Their structure can be complex, and they may require multiple representative images. So for instance, the accordion fold is a common format for artist books. And with this one, I wanted to show the content of the book because I liked it. I also wanted to show the folded structure. I really wanted the cover with the title in there, along with some representative pages. Anyway, I tried a lot of different arrangements and moving it around on the table. And I finally said, just give me a second copy of the book. I did two of them together so I could get everything I wanted into one photo. This book is a work of art on every page. And I did take some images of individual pages, but I also wanted to show the physicality of the book with the weight of the folded pages and the way that they are pulling against the binding and the tension created there. Likewise, this book is a dazzling work of art on every page. And again, I got 2 copies because I wanted to show the cover. I also just wanted to show the range of the command of color and imagery throughout the thing. So I showed little glimpses of each page. But the binding structure is also really interesting. So I did a high angle shot to make that evident as well. This artist book takes the form of a scroll in a bottle with a wooden cork resting on a little ceramic dish. The scroll contains a poem called Any Number of Things, and it's about the death of Captain James Cook in 1779. And you can see that the title of the poem is also etched onto the glass bottle. So the picture's okay as far as it goes, but there's so much it doesn't show. So more pictures. From this angle, you can see how long the scroll is. It's actually a 10-foot scroll, so I wanted the density of the rolled up paper to make it clear this isn't just a little scrap of paper in a bottle with a little note on it. And you may be able to see on the top of the wooden cork, it says 005. Artist books are published in runs of 20 or 50 or 100 or however many they do. And then each one is numbered. So this is number 5 out of, I think it might have been 250. I can't remember now. So here's a better look at the full extent of the 10-foot scroll. And you can see that it's a poem. It's a very elemental telling of the events around Captain Cook's death. Very simple sequence of words: a boat, a knife, a boat, a rope, a shoe, and so on. And it's told in words and pictures. And you may be able to see it up here that most of the letters are in black, some are in gold. I actually got a better view of that, so let's move on. Okay, some of them are in gold, and they spell out sort of a subtext to the evidentiary story, and that text reads: fear, a wish, a lie, those sins. So it unearths more of the psychological and emotional content of the incident. Along with that, there's the printing, there's the lettering, there's the texture of the handmade paper and the paper appliques. So these are all the reasons I took several high-res photos of it so this detail could be seen online, and then stitched them together in a single image of the scroll. But that's not all. The plate the bottle rests on also contains a portrait of James Cook himself, and this becomes even more meaningful when you see that the portrait was done in calligraphy, and the calligraphy contains a much longer, wordier story of the death. And I'm not sure about this, but I think maybe it was a contemporaneous account, maybe from a member of the crew. So meaning is embodied in every piece of this book, and of course it cannot all be captured in just a single photo. So I wish I had all day and I could just keep showing you pictures of books from the amazing collections of this library, but we have to move on to image accuracy and compliance with standards. And originally I was going to break these out into 2 parts and address them separately, and then fought with that for a little while and realized the overlaps are so complete that I better just combine them. So what do we mean by image accuracy and compliance with standards? I use a variety of guides for this, but the main one is the federal agency's Digital Guidelines Initiative. It is not standard itself, but it does give you guidelines for meeting published standards. So it's about 90 pages, and here's page 47. No, that's slide 47. This is one of the pages. It's broken out into tables with guidelines for various types of materials, and this happens to be the one for bound books in your rare and special collections. So they recommend things like using file formats that actually support long-term digital preservation, which of course is essential, especially for a library. They talk about image resolution and color encoding and a lot of other elements of good digital imagery. And They include elements like tone response, which is just the expression of grays along a scale of black to white balance. Illuminance uniformity is important. Of course, so is color accuracy. And you can see these are all shown as deviations from an ideal standard. And the tolerances are pretty broad at 2-star level, and they get narrower as you go to 4-star, which is the highest level of compliance. Okay, so do all of my images meet 4-star compliance? No, they do not, and they really don't have to. There are a few cases in which that's needed, but for the most part, 2-star and 3-star are perfectly acceptable. So how do we know which level of compliance we're meeting? Well, we use imaging targets, and there are all kinds of targets. There are color checkers and grayscales, and there are transparency scanning targets, and even a simple gray card will tell you if your white balance is correct, if your lighting is good, or it's overdone or underdone, and whether the uniformity of your lighting across the field of capture is good. This device here is, this target is called a device level target. It is used to measure the imaging performance of a piece of equipment, so I want to spend a couple minutes on it. This tests for a number of things at once. I'm not going to go over all of them, but here's just a few. Okay, resolution. Going back to my notes, I want to make sure I get this right. The thing about resolution is it's often used as a measure of image quality in terms of pixel per inch resolution, but it's only one factor. So now you can digitize with a resolution as high as you want, but if your lens isn't good and your camera's image sensor isn't good, just adding more pixels is not going to rescue a bad image. So 1,000 pixels of garbage per inch is still garbage. Focus. That comes down to the quality of the lens you use and whether you're using the right kind of lens for the right kind of shot and whether you're focusing it properly, obviously. White balance is measuring a neutral gray patch like this one and making sure that the red, green, and blue digital color inputs all balance are out. So you don't have a color cast one way or another that's distorting all of the colors in your image. And all the gray patches on this tone scale should read as neutral. Dynamic range is the ability of equipment to capture a range of tones from white to black. And again, to get all these subtle transitions of grays in the middle. And then correct lighting isn't really a thing measured here, but it is an activity that will influence these other things and what you end up seeing on the target. So what you do is take a picture of the target or scan it on your flatbed scanner, and then you run it through some image analysis software that will tell you how close you come to being in with within the tolerances set for different levels of image performance. So the resolution and focus is measured in these little focus targets, and this is what they look like blown up. And the way this works as far as measuring resolution is that the lines start out far apart up here. They get much closer here, and then there's a smaller version here. The point at which you can no longer see any space in between these lines is the upper limit of the resolving power of your equipment. So if someone's trying to sell you a scanner and saying, this captures 24,000 pixels per inch, that's all fine, but these targets are actually going to tell you what you're really getting. So this one tapers out at around 600 pixels per inch, which you know is fine. If you remember looking at the guidelines a few screens back, they were talking about 300, 400 pixels per inch being the minimum for certain use cases. 600 is fine. There might be some cases where you need more. Then you get yourself a macro lens and put it on the camera so you can get even better resolving power. Here, I think I already explained this, so I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. You're looking for dynamic range. You're looking for the color accuracy. And again, correct lighting will influence this because, say, your scene is overexposed. I'm going to go back and forth here a couple times. So if you look at this white and then these gray patches here, overexposure exposure not only distorts everything, but now like all these patches are blown out to white, which is no good. You're losing detail in between. Um, and if it's underexposed, as you watch the black patches on the lower tone scale, look now everything, all the grays are compressed to the same near black. That's no good either. Once again, you're losing detail. So back to a correctly balanced target, white balance. If it's off, this will show it because you know it'll suddenly everything will have a bluish cast or a yellow cast. So you want to fix that. So that's how the targets work. And here's why all of these concepts described there are important. We're back to this Bible with the staining on the pages and looking at the area boxed in yellow on the lower left. Here, because the focus and resolution are good, I can read this extremely small printing. I can read the name of the publisher and the year. I can even read the name of the engraver. And I can see all the great little midtones in here that model this beautiful image. With medieval and Renaissance manuscripts, of course, you want the best focus and resolution you can get so that you can see the illumination of the letters. You can see the texture of the parchment. A good conservator can look at the texture of a piece of parchment and tell you what kind of animal skin it was made from. And also important are the shapes of these letters. So if you think about a remote researcher who can't come here to handle the manuscript, they're looking at these letter shapes. They may be trying to identify the scribe who wrote this manuscript. This is especially important when manuscripts and leaves from manuscripts have been scattered in libraries and museums around the world. They can be reunified in different ways. And one way would be able to see, okay, who wrote this? Do we know the handwriting of this person? So similarly here, beautiful illumination on the letters, and also completely different letter shapes than in the one before. So this is distinctive handwriting. And I'm just going to throw in here that the excellent dynamic range of the camera that took this makes it possible to see these little pencil lines that the scribes made before they wrote. They're not that different than the color of the parchment. So being able to see that difference is important. A third manuscript, completely different style of illumination. And again, different letter forms. This piece of parchment has been through some stuff. The wrinkled texture all over the surface also speaks to the history of this object. So you can see it in the places where the shadows are pretty deep, but even here where they're lighter and fainter, the image quality lets you see all that. This is a very much blown up image from a very small piece of parchment that was written on in iron gall ink that was popular from the 9th through 15th centuries. The thing about iron gall is that its iron sulfate content makes the paper beneath become weak and brittle, and pretty soon pieces of it just start popping out. So the fact that these holes are here, which are hard to see unless you can get a high-res image and then blow it up, is a clue that this was written in iron gall. So again, there's a lot of evidence to be collected from here if you have an accurate enough image. I want to talk about lighting for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to check my time here. Okay, I'm going to speed it up. As I said, lighting is very important, and I want to talk about a couple ways in which I use lighting. So we use electronic strobe flashes for most of the photography, and use different kind of light modifiers. So here, this is over the light. This is a Bell reflector with a hard silver lining that bounces the light around and keeps the power going as the light goes out into the room. And these so-called barn doors can be folded in or out to control the width of the beam of light and the direction. This, by contrast, is a soft box, and this piece of white fabric acts as a giant diffuser, softens the light. It also spreads the light. So if your light's this big, you can spread it out to a larger area to photograph a large object. These are two kinds of modifiers we use a lot. Here's the thing about the direction of light. Badly placed, you get this kind of effect. So this book's on a copy table with a camera overhead. Two lights out to the side go in the wrong direction. So they're causing these blasted out highlights and these deep shadows that are actually obscuring some of the text. Now it's not a readable object in its digital form. If you just turn the book 90 degrees and you light along the binding instead of across it, then you have a nice clear image with good lighting uniformity and good readability. Back to manuscripts. Here's a case where you actually do want to use some pretty heavy directional light, and that is because this manuscript has some gold leaf on it, but with this flat lighting, it's hard to distinguish it from the ink on the page. But with direct lighting, that gold leaf really comes out. You can see the luster. You can also see the shape of it and the way it's bent, and you can see the gaps where it's flaking off. Here's a case where direct light would not be a good idea because this 3-foot diameter chunk of wood from a white oak in southern Ohio, 340 years old, brought down in a lightning storm, was rescued by the Department of Natural Resources, and they put a thick coat of varnish on it. If I were directing light straight at this thing, you'd get huge blocks of light on it. All the detail would be blasted out. And I know this looks like it was photographed in some pristine gallery, but I can assure you that was not the case. This is me in the tech center. This is a testament to just what a good piece of curved paper can do for your background. These two lights are angled, so not directed right at the object, but they're lit from the sides. So all you get is all you get is this bit of highlight at the edges, which is fine. And then you can still see the detail of the wood grain. This was a book stamped with an image of Protestant reformer Martin Luther. And the thing is, if I directed just a normal light at it, everything would be flattened out. You wouldn't see the stamping because it's pretty shallow, and the book is monochrome. It would be hard to see. So how do you do that? It's very simple. You send a raking light across one side and use a black piece of cardboard, which is what I use, cardboard, on the other side to absorb the light and let there be shadow coming back in this direction to make the shapes. Lighting equipment doesn't always have to be expensive. Always get the best you can, and then beyond that, just improvise. Everyone uses cardboard because it's efficient, lightweight, and cheap. I don't have time to talk about this one, I'm afraid. But this is a sketch I did before attempting a really tricky shot. And this is just to say that sometimes, like taking technical notes is good, having a checklist is good. Something about doing a drawing of the scene at least helps me to feel like I have some control over a project that's a little scary. In this case, it was a 24 by 26 inch glass plate negative from the 1850s, very fragile. Doing this, the thought of doing it was terrifying. The drawing really helped me calm down. And the effort was successful. There's the glass plate negative. There's a piece of milk plexi, translucent white plexiglass that we used as a giant diffuser. And the light is down here, camera's up here. We got a picture of the negative and then digitally converted it to a positive. And then here's a little detail from the center of the image. So this is the room where I do most of my work in the tech center. People come visit and go away saying, Amy works in a small gray windowless room, which is fair. I'm not sure they know how much I enjoy working here though. So this is basically the setup. We got the overhead camera, we got the copy table, all kinds of things go on here. The camera is tethered to this computer, so all the images are loaded to the computer for processing. It's hard to see any of this because everything's black, but this is a light with a bell reflector in front of it. For books that won't lie flat and can't go on the V-shaped book scanner I showed you earlier because they're too rare or fragile, we use a book cradle so that we can prop up one side and then capture the pages on the other side. So this is a slower imaging method. We're going through page by page like this. Some of these books are really challenging, so-called springy books. where even if you put one side up and lay the other flat, the flat side's just going to flip up because the binding is that tight. And this was one of those books. Here's a close-up of how we managed it with some clear exhibit tape. Worst of all is the very small springy book, such as this 15th century prayer book that people could carry in their hand, carry in their pocket, and take it out to read their prayers at the appointed hours every day. This was impossible to keep down. Just imagine this flipping up and flipping up and flipping up. So we had to hold it down and go through page by page, doing it this way in order to get images like this. Lengthy process. We were really glad it was only like a 40-page book. This is the software end of the process. At the beginning of each session, I take a picture of some kind of target, a white balance on that patch. I make sure the tones are correct. If there's anything that can't be compensated for in the lighting in the room and the camera settings, there are software settings I can use to get things a little bit tighter. And then I can just save all those settings into what's called a style, a user style, and then reference that setting with every picture I take. So instead of doing a lot of post-processing after taking the pictures, I try to keep that to a minimum by doing a lot of pre-processing, so to speak, a lot of setup, a lot of careful setting of everything, and then we can shoot pictures and ideally do no post-processing or minimal post-processing. These items are called daguerreotypes, and I'm going to use the rest of my time to talk about daguerreotypes because they are wonderful. They are photos taken during the 19th century before they had film negatives that you could create and then print to paper. So there are no prints made from these. Each of these items is unique. This is the only edition of the photo ever made and the only one that ever will exist. They were done on copper plates that were coated with silver, and they give them this really luminescent quality. They are wonderful for just seeing people who existed in the 19th century, the variety of people from various walks of life, and sometimes their pets. So with the silver plating, daguerreotypes are extremely reflective. This can be a problem because then you have to light carefully. It can be done, but it's a long setup. We got the camera equipment masked off with only a hole cut for the lens in this board because otherwise you'd have a reflection of the camera rig, the column. We had to hang black velvet from here to photograph this daguerreotype. And you can see from an angle some of the reflection happening. And then when it's done, we have a pretty well balanced photo with not a lot of reflection here, but just enough to show the gold protector. There's glass over this, and then the velvet cushion that protects the glass when this little photo case is folded. We documented everything about these. So the carved cases that the photos were kept in, the sides of the cases and the fittings, the clasps. We photographed the daguerreotypes inside their original cases, and then our conservators very carefully took them out and disassembled them. And we were able to photograph the insides of the cases as well, which is great because sometimes there is evidence about who made the case and where and when. And then with the plates out of the cases, we were able to get these lovely photos with very careful lighting using large white reflectors, which create a soft light, but also a very clear light. So you can see the people very clearly. You can see the details of the plates and the oxidization and deterioration that's slowly been happening. Then Marcella, our conservator, puts them back in the cases and seals the cases to protect them from further oxidation. This is a way fancier lighting setup drawing than I normally do, but this was for a poster at a conference, so I busted out some good illustration software and did that. Normally though, it's just pencil sketches on paper. But these are the various approaches to the lighting we had to do because each component of the daguerreotype and the case it was housed in needed different kinds of lighting to bring out the most salient qualities. If you want to know more about photographic lighting, there are two books I refer to constantly. This one, Light, Science, and Magic, is sort of a foundational text that discusses the physics of light and then gives you case studies of how to solve certain lighting problems, really is what it is, problem solving. And then the other, Lighting Methods for Photographing Museum Objects, is more of a very practical manual that shows you different cases that come up in museums and could come up in libraries and archives. And they have some excellent lighting diagrams. So thank you again for coming. I hope I've left sufficient time for some questions. Okay, I am seeing 3 questions here. From Tina Schneider, are the targets used before digitizing each item then to adjust the equipment? Good question. The targets are used at the very beginning of the session, and all the adjustments are made then, and they should work for each item photographed. So for instance, with daguerreotypes, where the case is different from the plate, or the plate inside the case or outside the case, we're doing these in batches. So it's all cases, and then it's all the cases open, all the plates out of the cases, all the insides of the cases, and so on. So each setup is a setup for a certain kind of object. And we don't have to light and make adjustments and shoot targets for every item in the batch. Every batch contains like items, so the settings we start with apply to everything. Did that answer your question, Tina? I'm hoping that's the information you were looking for when I look at the chat. Okay, great. Okay, from Pasha Johnson, how long does it take you to digitize something like a medieval codex, which could be 300 folia or 600 pages? It all depends on the binding. If the binding is cooperative and the book opens, it takes a bit longer than a regular book, but not that much more. So about 60 to 150 pages per hour for the capture part, depending, and then whatever processing afterward might be necessary, like cropping or rotating images, if that's a part of it, and then outputting them to preservation compliant formats. If it's a springy, tiny prayer book, that could be a couple of days just to get it right and to handle the object carefully and not damage it. Tina Schneider, did you have a background in art or photography to begin with? My bachelor's degree was in art with an emphasis in painting rather than photography. And then my master's degree was in library science. I started getting interested in photography in high school and just running around with a camera, taking pictures of stuff in my town. And then when I was in college, I got a good camera and started reading photographic manuals to learn how things work, how to manage the manual settings. And so did that for a long time and really thought I knew it all. And then when I got into cultural heritage imaging, I realized I'm going to need an entirely new education because this is completely different from portrait, landscape, or documenting photography. It really is a whole other thing. And I'm still learning. Like I say, those 2 books I talk about, I refer back to them all the time. Marilyn Scott, when you need to do post-processing, what types of things do you find you need to correct? Are these corrections done in Photoshop? I'm glad you asked because I didn't even mention what software I used, although I showed pictures of it. The software is a raw image processor called Capture One. It's kind of similar to Adobe Lightroom. It comes bundled with the camera that I use. So we're editing the raw images from the camera and then converting to TIFF rather than creating TIFF images and editing those. And the important thing about editing raw images is you have a larger set of data as far as the details and color of the images. So it's important to do the editing then. The types of things we do, it's usually rotating the images if like the book has to be set up in such a way as to get the lighting right. So we rotate. Sometimes cropping images, if I can't build the image crop into the settings before shooting, because the images are different sizes, then we have to crop to within a centimeter of the object in post-processing. And sometimes the lighting and exposure used for everything like works for most of the batch, but then some things it doesn't work for, so then we actually do have to adjust that in post. And then the rest is outputting to a preservation compliant format like TIFF, and then embedding metadata, technical metadata into the images. Descriptive metadata is another department, but camera and color metadata is my thing. And I do that in Adobe Bridge, because you can also do that in batches when you're shooting hundreds or thousands of images. Using batch processing tools in Capture One and Adobe Bridge is really important because time is expensive. Pasha Johnson, what was the most challenging thing you had to photograph, and what was your favorite object to digitize? The most challenging things have all been reflective things. So like the glass bottle with the scroll in it, that took some doing. There's a compass I kind of wish I had shown here from the Byrd Polar Archive. That was a so-called sun compass that Richard Byrd used on his airplane as he flew over the poles, because you can't use a magnetic compass at the poles. And it had like a directional dial on it with a lot of details and a sort of spinner that shows you where you are. And like all that's under a thick glass dome, and glass is hard to photograph anyway, but when there's something you have to see in the glass, it's even harder. My favorite object to digitize, hands down, was from the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum. It was a painting done by George Harriman that had a very dimensional wooden frame as a part of the object. George Harriman's one of my favorite cartoonists, so to actually handle a painting that he made and digitized it was awe-inspiring. I hyperventilated a lot that day and then finally got it together and took the picture. Still a favorite. I think that's the end of the questions. Is there anything we want to do with the chat? Oh, thank you, Marilyn. So Q put links in the chat for the football programs and for the Lantern Online. So I encourage you to follow those links and enjoy all that content. It's really a lot of fun to take a look back at the history of the university. Some things now really aren't that different from how they were then, you find out. Okay, I guess we're at about 10 till. So I will wait and see if there are a couple more questions. And if not, we'll close it out in a couple minutes. Courtney's saying, okay, what's in the collection at Fine Arts? Is it one of the artist books, Courtney? Oh, great. Yes, Courtney, I would be delighted to share those images with you. Nina, yes, there's other work in Knowledge Bank, such as actress scrapbooks, which are, oh, I love those so much. Like I said, I would have put everything I've ever done in this presentation if there were time. The actress scrapbooks are delightful. They are from the turn of the last century. The pose slides, hand-painted glass slides of a kind of performance from the turn of the last century called pose plastique, which is a thing unto itself. If you go to the Knowledge Bank and look in the Theater Research Institute collection, you'll see those things. And they're great to read about as well as look at the images. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, these comments are wonderful. I mean, I love it that you all showed up, and seeing your reactions just really has made this presentation into something meaningful. All right. Oh, okay, we have one more question. Someone asked during the conservation presentation the other day, is there some equipment you don't have that you would like to have? Yeah. And there always will be because they're always making more and more incredible photographic equipment. This last decade has been absolutely revolutionary for photography. So okay, there are just a lot of things I'd like to have because they're cool, but I will try to focus on some emerging technologies that are interesting to hear about. There is hyperspectral or multispectral imaging, UV imaging, RTI imaging. These are basically all types of imaging that are diagnostic in nature and can show you more about the materials you're working with. And a famous example is palimpsests, which are parchments that were written on in one era, 1,000 or more years ago. And then somebody at a monastery was running out of parchment. They didn't have any money to get more parchment. It was expensive to make. So they would just scrape off the parchment and then write on top of it. It's like reusing paper, right? You know, reuse. That's good practice. But unfortunately, sometimes the stuff underneath the new writing would be like something Archimedes had done in ancient Greece. So they now have imaging technologies that will let you look under the top layer of writing and see what's left under the scraped off, partially scraped off layer of parchment and see the old writing too, which is just fascinating. There's a great presentation online about how this was done at the Waters Museum in Baltimore some years ago, and it's called the Archimedes palimpsest. I'll just type it here. That's a lot of fun to read if you like this kind of thing. So that kind of equipment, all the cool kids have it, and the rest of us just kind of sit and watch them and think, wow, wow. I hope someday I can do something that cool. I misspelled palimpsest. There's a P between the M and the S. If you Google the misspelling, it'll probably come up anyway because it's kind of a singular word. All right, well, again, thank you everyone for coming to see this. It was just a lot of fun talking to you all, even if I don't get to see you in person these days. Um, and I look forward to doing this again. I look forward to seeing the presentations that I know a lot of you have coming up too. Thank you so much, Q, for putting this all together and walking me through the kind of multi-level problems I was having at the intersection of Zoom and PowerPoint 10 minutes before the thing. You rescued it. Thank you. And everybody have a great afternoon.